Welcome to the Women Shifting Gears podcast driven by Hemmings. I'm your host, Amanda Busick. Our podcast aims to introduce you to the inspirational women who showcase their talents and leaderships across the automotive and motorsports worlds. And even when I have my own moments of doubt and uncertainty, it is with this community of women that I'm reminded of what is possible. Thank you all for sharing in this space of authenticity with us. Here we go. In April, the formation of Women in Motorsports North America, also known as WIMNA, was announced as a community of professionals devoted to supporting opportunities for women across all disciplines of motorsport. While that might be the date of launch for this collective, it has been a long-time mission of co-founders Lyn St and Beth Paretta. The 7-time Indy 500 starter and the IndyCar team owner fill us in on how a pre-race conversation at the Indy 500 last year actually led to the development of WIMNA, the incredible support that the organization has already received, and why we are right on time in pushing forward their key initiatives. Both Lyn and Beth will take part of WIMNA's first official fundraiser at the Automotive Hall of Fame in Detroit on June 1st. The event will kick off with a private screening of the Boundless Betty Skelton documentary, followed by a discussion on how the documentary was made, leading into a final panel focused on Women in Motorsports North America. All proceeds raised for the event will go directly to WIMNA. Head over to womeninmotorsportsna.com to learn how you can attend this special event in person or through virtual admission. Now let's hear from this incredibly inspiring duo on your Women Shifting Gears podcast, driven by Hemmings. Welcome to the Women Shifting Gears podcast, driven by Hemmings. And what happens when two of the most powerful and vocal women in the support of women's motorsport initiatives join forces? Well, what you get is the Women in Motorsports North America. It was launched in April of 2022. And joining us today on the podcast is Lyn St. and Beth Paretta, who came together in this initiative. And Lyn, I'm going to come to you first on this. I know we've had you on the podcast before. I know you are such a staunch believer and rooter for all things women in motorsports. How long has this been something that you've been considering?
About 30 years, actually, when you think about it. I mean, seriously, when I go back to the 90s, when I did Indy in 92, but even prior to that, when I was involved as the past president of the Women's Sports Foundation, I got to meet Billie Jean King, and I got involved with that organization. I realized that if people come together, you can really make a difference. It's hard. I mean, as powerful as Billie Jean is, she couldn't do this all by herself. Even when she started the Women's Tennis Association, she got, I think, 9 players to, literally stand out and not agree to play unless they got equal money. So, and that formed the WTA. So it takes collective power of people. But I didn't have a collective power in the early 90s. But I had a passion and a vision. I knew that my efforts were no longer just about me, as much as I wanted them to be about me and as much as I felt they were about me when I was in the race car. I also knew that I was changing attitudes. My voice was reaching people beyond even what I understood. And so that's why I created my own foundation. That's why I created a driver development program, because the reality is the drivers, in my opinion, are the ambassadors. They're still the most visible people. They're the ones that the general public knows. It's the one the fans know. And so that was what I focused on. And I obviously got tired of hearing, well, where are all the other women, Lyn? And I'm like, they're coming. I know they're coming. So obviously Sarah came, and then Danica came, and, a few others, followed, and that helped a heck of a lot. But at the same time, to be really honest, I felt like the Lone Ranger. I continued all through the 2000s, and I'm not going to say the sport didn't, they were nice to me. The industry was nice to me. They patted me on the back, patted me on the head, said, "You're really doing good stuff, Lyn." We really, but nobody was writing checks. Nobody was really, stepping into the space with me. I was just pulling and pulling and pulling and pushing. And so, to be honest, I got quiet, back in the 2010s. And then I was invited to be on the board of ACUS, which is the Automobile Competition Committee of the United States. And those are the leaders of the industry. And I told them then, I mean, thank you very much. It was totally out of left field. But I said, I'm not going to be quiet. You know that if I'm here, I don't need this, you're going to hear from me and we're going to make things happen. And I mean, I'm not sure they really thought I still had the energy, but anyway, I let them know that, and had a couple of runs at a few things that didn't work. And then, I just was so overwhelmed with what Beth did at Indy last year. I mean, it just literally, I got chills, tears in my eyes. She just made a huge leap, for women in the sport, not just in Indy racing, but in the sport. And so got our heads together. I asked her, I said, hey, would you can I talk to you? I said, I feel like, that I'm no longer the Lone Ranger, and she said, you aren't. We're doing this for everybody, not even, so that was the beginning. And that's what, we didn't know where it was going to go. But the good news is we were aligned philosophically. We respect each other so much. And then the other good news is that we were really able to engage at that time 40 other men and women. And that was, I literally get goosebumps telling the story, because then I felt like I was living the Women's Sports Foundation again, where men and women are coming together to make a difference for women in sports. Men and women were now coming together to make for a difference for women in motorsports, my sport, the sport that I love so much. So that's how it all kind of started. And the momentum has been fabulous. The support from these individuals, that's now grown over to 100 people. And we know it's going to grow even bigger. It's the right time. It's the right time and the right place.
Beth, I want to come to you now, and that conversation with Lyn St. James when she approached you on all of this, and you told her that you're no longer and never were the Lone Ranger at this, I guess, from your perspective. But what do you remember about that conversation?
Our conversation was, the first kind of emotional conversation was literally the starting grid of the Indy 500 or the pre-race of the Indy 500 of 2021. And it's funny because I think people might wonder, why do programs like mine, why are we even doing this? Why does Women in Motorsport North America matter? And the funniest thing is, I always say women have been in racing, right? We've been kind of peppered about. Why the idea for my team came together and why I pushed so hard and worked so hard to put it together is really just to make something very visible. It was just to make us bigger. And if we were bigger, then you'd notice us. The fact is that there have been women in racing since the beginning, and, few and far between. But if we kind of put everybody on one team in matching shirts and matching uniforms, people start to take notice differently. What was interesting through last year too, in 2021, is now as we burst on the scene with the open test in April, and then you see us through the couple of weeks in May, and you saw other teams were putting their women that they might have had that either were working back at the shop or might have been in a more hidden role. They were putting their women front and center. And we'll take that as a win because they were there all along. You had the power all along, Dorothy, but you put them forward. And that's the goal. As I always say, because people often, because it's kind of shorthand or being lazy, people say like, oh, you've got the all women's team. And I'm such a stickler for vernacular. I hate references to all women's this, all women's that, like all, another announcement, another all women's team. No, that's an all women's driver lineup, which is important, but call it what it is. Because trust me, that guy that's driving the truck, the transporter from place to place, that's a guy. I can see him. But with that said, our team is majority women, but I don't want to have 100% women's team. I want women on 100% of the teams. I want people of color on 100% of the teams, the minorities. And the reason why that matters, I come to this with a different experience than Lyn. Lyn was a racing driver. I was a business person. So I have built teams, whether they're business teams, racing teams, and I have seen like how you balance out strengths and weaknesses. If somebody has a strength in one spot, but a weakness in another, ideally you balance it out with somebody else that can kind of balance them out and create a formidable, group of people together doing great things that they couldn't do individually. So I saw the opportunity within racing. I saw the excitement that it can bring. And that's kind of how I came together with my team. But why it's important is, here's an interesting thing about the Indy 500 specifically. It's very visible. It's still the single largest sporting event in the world, single day sporting event in the world. It is unique that you can kind of drop in and just do it as a one-off, which we did last year. So you kind of get to be part of the big show if you qualify, which we did by the skin of our teeth with seconds to spare. But what is amazing about that, so 2021, it was the 110th anniversary since the race started, right? In 110 years, there hadn't been a majority women's team. Okay, that's a big number. Here's another crazy number. Women were not allowed in the paddock at Indianapolis Motor Speedway until 1971. And Lyn knows what that to be on the outside of the fence and you can't go in. Your male friends can go in, but you can't because you're a woman. That was 1971. Here's the crazy thing. So they allow women into the paddock in 1971. My team, 2021, was 50 years later. It took 50 years to get a team of majority women. That's a long time. So you might say, like, do we need things like this? Yeah, we do. And it's about visibility. And really, it's not about the people that are already there. It's about the people in the stands at home. It's about people in the stands and watching at home. And this is about the future health of our sport because we need people to watch. Racing is entertainment. It's sports and entertainment. We need people to be tuning in on TV and watching from home. And this is about investing in our collective future. So yes, there's great things about having a diverse paddock, but why? Because we want fans to care about it.
What was going through your mind Sunday morning at the Indy 500?
If I'm completely honest it was about the micro details. The idea of the history was I don't want to say lost on me because that's not being authentic. I knew how historic it was because that's why I did it. But I didn't feel any of it on the day because I was so focused on my job, which I'm sure probably Lyn knows what that's like. When she was in a race car, she was in the race car. And so when I'm standing on that grid or I'm standing on the timing stand, I just wanted to hit my marks. It hit me in December when I went back because I had to go to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum to give them artifacts because, you want to feel old when you're in a museum. But when I pulled into, I drove through the tunnel at gate 2 and to go to the Speedway Museum, I parked my car and I got out and I had chills. And I literally had that moment of like, oh my God, I was in the Indy 500. I probably hadn't, I know, and it sounds like ridiculous, but yeah, it hit me like that because I'd been there so many times and I've been part of, I've had, friends and loved ones that are in the race. So I've lived, a bit of, I know what the month of May is like. But I didn't know it by having the responsibility and my name on the wall or my name on the shirt. And it wasn't until December going to the museum when I had a quiet moment by myself that I thought, oh, dear Lord, we did it. And we'll be back again.
And Lyn, I'm going to come back to you here. But Beth, I just want to cap on one thing because I know that there's, publicity takes different turns and I'm sure there were naysayers around the whole initiative and doing it. And so in December, I hope there were I don't think either of you are satisfied because this is why this initiative exists, but were you at least proud?
I'm absolutely proud. How Lyn mentioned about getting letters. Those are the moments to this day, emails and letters, not only from young women, but also from men who are happy that their daughters or their granddaughters paid attention to the race for the first time because they're so happy that they can share their love of the sport, which they might not have ever been able to get their daughter to watch or their granddaughter to watch. And there's a prideful moment for them because they want to share their love of it. And that's a sweet thing. Even this weekend, I was at IMS and I was in the gift shop and, somebody came up to me and with their young son and he's a fan of Simona. And so it's just those moments where there's nothing, we do this for the fans. We do it for ourselves, but we absolutely do it for the fans. And they're the ones that keep us going because believe me, in between when you see us, there's a lot of difficult days. Right.
You mentioned when you guys started putting this collective together for WIMNA that 40 people men and women were originally involved. When you started reaching out to people in your network, what was their response of what you wanted to accomplish?
Well, I was really delighted that it was just it was like they were excited. I mean, they were really engaged. Not, oh my God, Lyn, what do you want us to do? It was, which is what they could have very well said. They're probably saying it now. But anyway, no, they were just totally engaged, excited, and they still are. So, I mean, they
all said yes. It was an instant. It was
yes, that's amazing.
Yes. Yeah. And what do we do? And how can we help?
And I was surprised how many of them didn't know each other. In other words, these are all people that almost to a letter, every one of them, you or I knew personally. And have known for many years. And I knew probably 50 or 60% of them, and if not more, and the same with you. But so many of them didn't know each other. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know each other? It's like, what have you been doing? But most everybody, you work so hard. You have no time, and I my racing career, unfortunately, when I got to the Indy level, I was only racing Indy or a few other races a year. I wasn't busy the whole year, but I was busy the whole year getting ready for the next Indy. So I had more time to be paying attention to the landscape. But I want to make a note of something that Beth said, and that I want to make sure we actually talk about, which is the survey that we are launching in June. Women in Motorsports North America will be launching it, which is the attitudes towards women in motorsports. I did this survey in 2005 in my foundation. And I wanted to try to get more data so that it wasn't just anecdotal, my experience or the experience of individual drivers. I wanted data. And we had over, I think, 1,800 respondents in motorsports. 75% of them were men, even though the title of this was The Attitudes of Women in Motorsports. And the comments, I found out on research surveys, most people don't fill in comments. They answer the questions, and particularly if they aren't going to get anything. And so many of the comments were, it wasn't just about women, seeing women race were going to impact daughters and young girls and women. It was the point that Beth made. It was that our sons are now going to see women doing something that they didn't think women could do, and they see it winning, they see it doing well, and that this will change their perceptions and their attitudes about how they respect women. So whether it's their teachers, their mothers, their sisters, that it'll. So it was like, whoa, the response to this was so much bigger than what I expected. So what we're going to do is we've taken that exact survey and we're going to do it again and be able to compare data from 2005 to 2022. And Michigan State University, Professor David Ferguson is going to be overseeing this whole, research data. So that'll be coming out on, there'll be promotions of how you get into the survey. But I'm still getting, fan mail today, and many of them talks about, their attitude about how seeing me back even then, which blows my mind, that it was changing, the way young boys and men see the world, quite frankly, and particularly see other women.
You were talking back in, I guess it was the 2010s, where you kind of, I don't want to say that the initiative hit a low point for you, but you weren't getting the responses that you wanted. And you notice that a lot sometimes with the virtue signaling, I guess is the term for it, of how, people say they want to support you, but when it comes down to it, the actions aren't really reflected. Have you noticed a shift in that? Are people putting their checkbooks where they need to be in terms of women in motorsports?
Well, the good news, it's really not about checkbooks at this point. I'm not saying we don't want money. Money always makes wheels turn. But it's really more about taking action. And I just ran out of steam. I mean, I just literally ran out of energy, which is really almost impossible for me to believe, but it did. But what I see now is it isn't what we're doing. It's the fact that we are, through Women in Motorsports North America, we become this portal of information about what others are doing. So, whether it's Shift Up Now, whether it's Michelle Delapana that has put together this next gen foundation. I mean, there's a whole list of these things that are happening for women in motorsports. And that's what we want to do, is celebrate what other people are doing and encourage more people to do more. So whether it's internships, whether it's scholarships, whether it's initiatives to be able to invite more women, whether it's through engineering, whether it's through driving. I mean, what we're trying to do is celebrate what's happening and let people know there's a lot happening. But at the same time, step in and start doing something and let us know. We'll help promote you. And it could be jobs. It could be anything that just invites more women to participate in this sport and then to be successful. I'm also tired of hearing the whining and about how hard it is. Yeah, it's hard. It's not for everybody. But if you stepped into the space and you got the bug and you are truly passionate about it, you're not working. You're just living your life. You're living something that just is fabulous. And so that's really it. Yes, it's going to take money. Yes, we're going to have opportunities to maybe do some internships and fund internships and scholarships. But it's really about and it's about timing, Amanda. Everything's about timing. And I think that the social injustices that have been happening in our society over the last couple of years, and I think COVID also brought people internalizing more, it's given people a time to take a breath and maybe value or evaluate what's important. And I think that the timing of all of this happening has made the timing right for something like this, that I can guarantee you 10 or 20 years ago, it was not happening. It was just a check a box and then move on. Now it's, what can we do? What can we do?
Absolutely. And a lot of corporate initiatives, most large corporations have initiatives now where they have to spend in the ESG space. They have to do things for social good. And so they're actively looking now. And in addition to that, too, you have companies that have a better appetite for spending on programs that could benefit kids, because it used to be that was a harder thing to convince them of, because you might say, hey, these kids could grow up and work for your company. Granted, if it's a consumer product, that's a kid's consumer product, that's different. And spending in that space has always been there. But things like us, where we have an initiative to try to inspire or spark the imagination of kids, that used to be a harder conversation to have. And now they're kind of all getting it, this idea of it takes a village, of if all of these major corporations, if Raytheon and Boeing and Ford and General Motors and Porsche all spend money on kids, there are things that it's like investing in that talent pipeline. Granted, we could realize it 20 years from now, but it matters. But I think, respectfully, one thing that is unique about motorsport versus other stick and ball sports, and certainly, for amateur all the way to professional level, is we know that this is unique about us, is that we don't have our sole revenue generator is sponsorship, right? So we don't have the ability, we don't have the benefit of having an arena where we're getting the draw of the ticket sales and the concession and the merchandise. Race teams run on sponsorship dollars. So hopefully one of the next efforts that we can do with Women in Motorsport North America, once it's established, is let corporate America know that these are ways that they can get involved, grassroots level, mid-level, professional level. But now it's also that easy portal of like, okay, where are these people I can invest in? Where can I find them? And this, again, becomes like almost this one aggregator of information, to also educate them on the value of why their sponsor dollars, how far they can go. Because what's fantastic about racing and what we're active in right now is we don't have to have our own league. We're not splitting the audience. If we're in an IndyCar race or a NASCAR race or an NHRA event, all of those audience, that entire audience is watching one place, and it's directed eyeballs. And that's, when you're looking to spend money, you want to spend it efficiently, and we can help them do that. We're always happy to help a company navigate this, because it could be overwhelming to know, hey, I would like to support an endeavor, but where do I start? So those questions are things that we hope to answer someday too. And then also that young racer that's kind of progressing in her career to know exactly, okay, how do you talk to a sponsor? How do you find a sponsor? And we can hopefully help on both sides.
Go to our website, just go to Racing 101. I learned a lot by going to Racing 101. I've been in this sport for 45 years. And so that really is the meat and the bones of what Beth was commenting on. So I think, we're this portal of information. It's overwhelming, but it's really positive. And, I think the other thing, women tend to always be a little more receptive to a company or somebody that's doing good things. And so, I think, and we are also industry wide. We want to be sure that we're not just talking about Indy cars. We're talking really industry wide. We have NHRA, we have USAC, we have IMSA, we have everybody, all forms of motorsports.
And that website is womeninmotorsportsna.com. And Beth, from even your standpoint, on the business side of aside from the WIMNA side, but in your role with Paretta Autosport, I'm sure you're having conversations with corporations. I'm sure the gig of raising money. Do you feel that even just in the last couple of years, there's been an evolution of these conversations, or is it still a hard sell of women in motorsports?
It's always difficult in general. Motorsport is difficult, for everybody, as we know. I will say, because, which is kind of the reason why I did it the way we did, is I am in a unique position where sometimes the phone rings inward now, which is a nice place to be. And hopefully that if we can do that, that will help happen to others as well. Because, we do have a nice story to tell, and something that hopefully brands might want to align with, but hopefully it's part of that education process so that they know that we're here. I mean, sometimes you say things to, obviously now when I'm at a cocktail party and people say, what do you do for a living? I have that moment where I say, I own an IndyCar team, and there's that hesitation, or I own a professional racing team is usually what I say. But prior to that, I worked in this business also, as an automotive executive, and people, there's still a lot of education to be done. A lot of times I say I was in the Indy 500. People are like, oh yeah, I don't watch NASCAR. So there's those moments too. And we're getting there. I will say we do have a lot, having been to Miami F1 and having gone to Austin, Texas last year, and having been to more F1 races than I can count in my lifetime. It's amazing to see Americans have discovered Formula One because of the Netflix series Drive to Survive. I'm hoping we're going to get this. We are getting a bit of a bleed off in IndyCar, but I'm hoping that we're going to see that in all racing in general, that now people that never would have considered this funny little sport that we do, that is actually global and huge, and they just were unaware of it, might now may have found reason to watch it, and hopefully they stay, right? And the more they stay, the easier those conversations are when you want to talk to Colgate Palmolive and talk about why people should talk about sparkling teeth.
It does seem to be a bit of a renaissance in motorsports right now that I do agree with you, Beth. I think it is kind of finding its way into the different channels. One of the kind of the central missions of WIMNA is to foster mentorship, advocacy, education, and growth to help ensure a successful and effective future for women in professional motorsport roles. Lyn, what does an effective future for women in this space look like to you?
I think it's representation of a lot of diverse populations, and particularly in this case, we are talking about women that, stand proud and tall in their shoes and in their uniforms and in their space, and they're everywhere. In other words, that it's just, they're peppered everywhere, not peppered back in a corner somewhere or off on a side, but that the critical mass, it's still about numbers. And so that the critical mass is there, and that they are as passionate and proud and excited about being in the sport, and that everybody that works in the sport, Amanda, you know this because you live it. Everybody that works in the sport are ambassadors for the sport. We spend all of our time, the way Beth was saying it, it's like, baseball, football in this country, all those other sports, everybody, even if they never watch it, even if they never played it, they know what it is. And they have an opinion, even if it's wrong. And so where motorsports, it's kind of like, you do what? There's this sort of, we always are educating people. And I think it's because we have too few educators. Women are beautiful educators. And so I think that of every female that comes into the space, whether they're already here or whether they're due to come in, is to say, welcome, but know your stuff and know that you represent the sport. And that's actually wear it proudly and spend time on airplanes or in public places talking about yourself and about your sport, because the reality is you are making a contribution to help grow the sport. And so I think that's what WIMNA is about. That's what, everybody that's already involved in it, I think they're starting to feel that. They're sensing that. They're realizing that it isn't just about them, about their job. It's actually about trying to make a contribution and make the sport grow. And they should all wear it proudly and, be ambassadors. Everybody that works in this industry, in this sport, should be. And in most cases, they are. If you talk to Kenny Bernstein, you talk to John Forrest, you talk to, if you're sitting with, I bet you Alexander Rossi or
Bobby Rahal,
Daly or Bobby Rahal. They're going to yap and yap about the sport, because
exactly.
they love it. And so if we have as many women, or at least more women that also do that, so whether it's Alba Colin, who's been in the sport for probably 30 years or more or whatever, that right. I think somehow we've given them permission to sort of wear this badge proudly and wear it with honor, instead of just being there and doing their job and
right.
kind of.
You have to remember that for many years, especially like if you're the driver, you're supposed to be front and center. If you're any of the other roles, especially if you were the only woman in the role, you were kind of just doing your job, getting it done, giving 110%, and maybe hoping that they didn't notice that you're a woman. So even when I was hiring some of our people last year, I said to them, hey, you're going to have to talk about what you do. And even from what I used to do, like I didn't get my jobs because I was a woman or because I was marketable. That wasn't in the role. If you're an executive, that's not, you have to do the job, right? So it can't be just, oh, and she's photogenic. Like that's not a thing if you're an executive. And because we all know that there's some photogenic people have gotten some drives that might not have necessarily put together, as fast a lap as somebody else could have. But with that said, when you're in all of these other roles, you're not used to putting yourself front and center. And usually as a woman, you're kind of like, let me just get the work done and hope that you don't notice that I might be a little different. So it was a little bit uncomfortable at first for us to put the woman thing forward. It wasn't what we were used to doing. And we all sort of realized and that's one thing that I actively talk to all of them about is we have to be deliberate about this. And we have to say the quiet part out loud. It's not for us. It's for the girl at home. It's for her father. It's for her brother. And then we're normalizing it. We're normalizing the fact that there's no such thing as traditional roles, that it's really just who's smart, who can work hard, and who can get the job done. I mean, that's the thing that's wonderful about racing is it's the great equalizer. It's against the clock. We'll hire you. If you're good at it, like you can't be bad at this. You can't be mediocre. You're not going to last.
It is exactly. If you are, you're in and out as quick as you can be. You know?
Exactly. It will spit you right out.
And I think that's the thing the sport has missed. You know, it isn't tokenism. It isn't about the woman driver or the woman engineer. This sport has always been about men and women doing their job and being the best at that job. And that's what our sport consists of. And if you're not, if you're a wanker, you're out of here. I mean, you are, there's a lot of
and that's why we say there's a shortage of talent in general. We know that's why I'm not in the Indy 500 this year. There's a shortage of talent. So what do? We need to make more. We need to make more talent. Well, who can we maybe invite to the table who listen, women are not a minority. We're 51% of the population globally. There's nothing minority about us. One of the biggest things that holds women back is ourselves. So let's open the door. Let's show you that you can do this and have confidence in yourself. And you know what? This sport and other places need it. We need the best and brightest. And that includes whoever you are, best and brightest. Can you engineer a fast race car? Can you switch out a gearbox really quickly? Awesome. Do we have a spot for you? Can you please put on this fire suit and these shoes and tuck your hair into this helmet? Great.
And I think the answer to this might be different for both of you. So answer as you will. But when are you satisfied?
For me, I'm going to probably say never. Because I don't see it ending. In other words, I don't know what the ending is, to be honest. I mean, you asked me kind of what I see. You asked me some question that gave me the answer of saying there's so many of us, and the ones that are there are wearing our badge proudly and everything. But I don't know. I know one thing. I will be gloriously happy when a woman wins the Indy 500. I mean, I want to see that in my lifetime because I know it's so doable. There are things that aren't doable in my lifetime, maybe. And I'm like, okay, somebody else can carry that on, but this one is doable. And so that is, but that, I don't know, satisfied isn't the right word, I don't think, but that definitely will be most excited and proud. I mean, even when Danica took the lead and the place went crazy, at the Indy 500, I have to admit, I was screaming, so, but yeah, so.
I mean, they cheered our pit stop this year. I mean, we had a majority women's pit crew that had a clean pit stop, and they cheered that, right? So it's all these little incremental things, and that wasn't leading the race. That was changing tires. I mean, so the lightning in a bottle when Danica was leading. The electricity, I'm sure, is still resonating and bouncing off those walls. How many years later? But I think I'm like Lyn, where we're probably wired to never be satisfied. That's why we're type A and why we're racers, because if we're perfectionists and we're always striving for the next thing. We're only as good as our next race. We're only as good as our next lap. And even though I'm not a driver, I still would consider myself a racer because that's how we're wired. So yeah, like Lyn, I'll be satisfied when a woman wins the Indy 500, but like her, not to put words in her mouth, but I think we probably would share this. But then we want to know when the next one's going to win it.
Well, you guys have an exciting year coming up for WIMNA. I know that the first friend raiser happening at the Automotive Hall of Fame in Detroit on June 1st. It's going to be a viewing of the Betty Skelton documentary, a couple panels involved in that. Talk about that event and what you're most looking forward to.
Well, the panel is going to be, I know, very interesting. I mean, Beth's going to be on it. I'm going to be on it. Taylor Ferns is going to be on it, who's a great racer that went to my driver development program when she was like 13 years old and, is still out there racing in sprint cars and midgets and is a lawyer, getting her law degree and all that. And Laura
Klauser.
Thank you.
From General Motors.
Yeah, from General Motors, who represents, General Motors in the engineering capacity at IndyCar and IMSA. So we've got rich, diverse stories to talk about. That'll be interesting. And we've got My Thunderbird that I set the records with, Talladega, is going to be there, as well as Taylor Ferns's, I think her sprint car is going to be there, her midget. So,
We'll have an IndyCar show car there too.
Oh, that's right.
Just to kind of represent each of the disciplines, because it's leading up to the Detroit Grand Prix the following weekend. So it's nice. We've got a lot of people in town for the Detroit Grand Prix, and they'll be able to be in attendance.
So it's about breaking barriers. It's a symposium about breaking barriers with the Betty Skelton sort of historical perspective, and then, leading into what's happening today. And so I think it'll be vibrant, discussion and informative and entertaining.
Well, I was thrilled to learn that regular tickets have already sold out for the event. VIP tickets are still available. Afterglow tickets are available if you want to come mingle with you guys after. And then, of course, to be able to join virtually is online as well. Those are available on the Automotive Hall of Fame website. Beth, before we close this out, some exciting news dropped for you just a little bit ago of your racing schedule for your plans for Paretta Autosport the rest of the year. What can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. And one thing to mention, that event on June 1st, the proceeds do support Women in Motorsport North America. So even if you can't attend in person and you're all over the country, you can attend virtually, and we will be so happy to have you as part of it. And I think you might be able to even ask questions live, even if not in the room with us. So that's always exciting now that we've all learned this technology, and it kind of makes things a little bit makes the world a little smaller in the nicest possible way. Yeah, very excited to announce that in 2022, we're going to be back on the NTT IndyCar grid. We are going to be campaigning 3 or more races this year, starting after the 500. Will be Simona Di Silvestro will be back with the gang, my lady gang. And we're going to integrate with our new technical partner, Ed Carpenter Racing. Will be physically on site around the Detroit weekend, but our first race is hitting the track 1 week later, June 12th at Road America. Will also be July 3rd at Mid-Ohio and August 7th on the streets of Nashville. So hopefully you can tune in on NBC or on Peacock, or see us in person and cheer us on and see, the next goal now is for my team to learn more tracks, beyond IMS, and also learn what it's like to have right side fueling and left side fueling in the car, because they train just for one way of what IMS is, but Road America is a completely different setup. So they're going to learn what a regular weekend race weekend is like instead of 2 weeks in May, and get Simona back into some tracks that she likes, road and street courses, and build towards doing a full-time season, hopefully as soon as we can. So hope to see fans out there, and if not in person, you can watch us on TV.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And Lyn, we had you part of season 1 on the Women Shifting Gears podcast, talking to you now a year and a half later. We know this mission and initiative is core to who you are. What have you seen in the last year and a half that gives you hope?
I think the response. To be honest, I think the time is right, as I think I mentioned. And so the response from the people that we've asked to contribute to their time and their energy and their expertise, but then also the response that we're getting from outwardly, from media, from people wanting, I've already got an inbox that I can't deal with right now, because, people are, this is what you wanted. Well, how am I gonna, and don't you know, this is May. I'm getting ready to go. I want to go be at the Indy 500. And all of a sudden I got to answer all these emails that I'm trying to connect. I've always loved to connect dots, but I've done it fairly, spontaneously or organically and randomly. And now it's like, be careful what you wish for, because it's happening. So I think that's what I'm seeing, is that this has definitely it's taken on a life of its own and an energy that's really fabulous.
Lyn St. James and Beth Paretta on the Women Shifting Gears podcast, driven by Hemmings. Thank you, ladies. This Women Shifting Gears podcast, driven by Hemmings, is a production of GS Events.